Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to welcome you to this webinar, World Elder Abuse Awareness Day Commemoration, Leveraging National Resources to Build Strong Support for Older Adults. This webinar is being brought to you by the Elder Justice Initiative, the Office for Victims of Crime Training and Technical Assistance, along with our other federal partners and agencies, and we appreciate everyone that can join us today. I do want to take a moment here to see that everyone is connected. As a reminder, the audio for today's session is being played through your computer. So we hope that you have your speakers on or your headphones or you're able to view our closed captioning. As with all technology, we may at some point experience a momentary lapse with the webinar, so we hope that in the event of such a problem that you can be patient with us and remain with us so that we can get reconnected and it should resume shortly. If you are having trouble with your connection or with the format that we're using today, please feel free to send a private chat message to our technical specialist, Danielle, in the chat feature down on the lower right. If for some reason you cannot access the chat or something's not working for you, you can also send Danielle an email at dmclean@ovcttac.org. That's dmclean@ovcttac.org. Throughout the webinar, if you have questions for our presenters, we encourage you to use the chat box for that as well. And we'll be taking time at the end of the webinar to ask our presenters any of the questions that you have, as long as we have time for that. And also want to make a note that today's session is being recorded. As you saw earlier in the chat, maybe we do make these sessions available on the OVC-TTAC and the Elder Justice websites, along with the PowerPoints following the webinar sessions, so you can access them again to go back and review, or if you have colleagues that missed the opportunity to be with us today, then there's an opportunity for them to view them later. So at this time, I'm going to turn things over to our host, Susan Lynch. She's Senior Counsel for the Elder Justice at the U.S. Department of Justice. Susan.
Well, thank you, Lori, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Susan Lynch, and I'm so pleased to be presenting today with so many of my federal colleagues. As we all know, Friday is World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, and we are really pleased to have the opportunity this week to share all of our agencies and other partners' work that we've done to build strong support for our nation's elders. At this point, I am going to introduce the presenters in the order that they'll be presenting. First, we have Lydia Chevere, Public Affairs Specialist from the Social Security Administration. Second, we have Aisha Gurley, Agent Specialist and Office of Elder and Adult Protective Services at the Department of Health and Human Services. Next, we have Mary Toomey, Aging Services Program Specialist, Office of Elder Adult Protective Services, the Department of Health and Human Services. I will then be presenting on behalf of the Elder Justice Initiative. We will then hear from Julie Schoen, Deputy Director of the National Center on Elder Abuse, and finally Eden Ruiz-Lopez, Project Manager for the National Center on Elder Abuse. At this point in time, I turn it back over to Lydia.
I am a Public Affairs Specialist in the Office of External Affairs, and our office is responsible for educating the public about our programs and services. Today, I would like to provide you with an overview of the Representative Payee Program, and I would also like to go over some of the recent legislative changes to the Rep Payee Program. Early on in Social Security's history, Congress recognized that some beneficiaries were incapable of managing their benefits and amended the Social Security Act to allow us to appoint representative payees for such beneficiaries. So we appoint representative payees for adults and children under Social Security's retirement, survivors, and disability programs, and for adults and children under the SSI program. Generally, Social Security presumes that beneficiaries are capable of managing their own benefits. However, as I said earlier, there's going to be some instances where someone may have trouble attending to their basic needs and managing their Social Security and supplemental security income. And in those cases, that's when we select a representative payee to help the beneficiary. So a representative payee is a person or an organization authorized to receive benefits on behalf of one or more people who are unable to manage or direct the management of benefits. Usually, individuals who need representative payees are sometimes our most vulnerable citizens. Currently, there are approximately 5.8 million representative payees managing benefits for 8.1 million Social Security beneficiaries. So as you can see, the ratio is not 1-to-1. Usually, we look for family or friends to serve as representative payees. We try to select someone who knows and wants to help the beneficiary. However, that's not always possible. When a friend or a family member, when they're not available, that's when we look for a qualified organization to be the representative payee. So I'm going to go quickly over the basic responsibilities for the representative payee. And basically the main responsibility is to use the beneficiary's check to meet his or her need. So quickly, first, the payee must ensure that the beneficiary has adequate clothing, housing, food, and medical care. Once these needs are met, then the payee can use the money to improve the beneficiary's daily living conditions or for better medical care. So for example, if the person has a regular bed, after they met their basic needs, they can get them a positional bed, right? Second, the payee must save any extra money in a savings account if there's any money left over after paying for those essential bills. And the payee can also provide the beneficiary with some spending money. Third, payees must keep accurate records of how they spend the beneficiary's money and report this information to the Social Security Administration. Each year, Social Security will ask payees to complete a form to account for the benefits he or she has received. Payees can fill out the form either via mail or online by going to our website. Now, under the new law, because there's been some recent changes to the law, and I'm going to cover all the changes towards the end, so I just want to mention this one now. Under the new law, parents of minor children, as well as spouses living together in the same household, are no longer required to complete the accounting form. So now, fourth, the payee must let us know about any events that affect the beneficiary's eligibility to receive benefits. We need to know if the beneficiary moves, starts working, receives other income, goes to jail, marries, or dies, right? If the beneficiary is an SSI recipient, they also need to let us know if they're over the resource limit, which is $2,000. Fifth, we need the payee to explain letters and notices from Social Security to the beneficiary and to help them interact with us. We send all of the beneficiary's correspondence to the payee, and we expect the payee to explain those letters to the beneficiary and to help them complete forms when necessary. So every time we send a check or a letter out, it's going to say Jane Doe for John Doe. And lastly, the payee and the beneficiary should talk about the beneficiary's needs and how to spend the money. So that's something that they should discuss together. And this is especially important if the rep payee does not live with the beneficiary. Now, I want to cover what happens when there's misuse of the benefits. So in an effort to avoid misuse or stealing of funds, Social Security monitors the representative payee activities by reviewing annual accounting forms, conducting on-site reviews, and responding to allegations involving possible misuse of benefits. We give special attention to those vulnerable beneficiaries who have no relative or close friends to assist them in the day-to-day management of their lives. In addition, we hire contractors who may contact the rep payee and ask for receipts and records of income and expenses. If a payee misuses benefits, they must repay the misused funds. A payee who is convicted of misusing funds may be fined and imprisoned. Now, there are some changes to the law again, and the new law allows for stronger monitoring We're going to be expanding our on-site reviews. So we're going to increase the number of on-site reviews, but in addition to that, we're also going to include family members. So as of April, we were only conducting on-site reviews to organizational payees, but that's going to change, okay? It is important to know that RepPay cannot collect a fee for their services unless the payee is a qualified organizational payee approved in writing by Social Security. And to qualify as a fee-for-service payee, an organization must be either a community-based or a nonprofit social service organization bonded and licensed in the state in which it serves as a payee, or a state or local government agency responsible for income maintenance, social services, health care, that sort of thing. And then in addition to that, they need to submit an application to collect fees, and we have to approve the application in writing. So they cannot collect money unless we approve it. And then, often family members use power of attorney as another way to handle a family member's finances. However, Social Security does not recognize power of attorney. So Social Security only recognizes the use of a designated representative payee for handling the beneficiary's funds. Likewise, payees have no legal authority to manage non-SSA income or medical matters. That said, as a payee, you may need to help a beneficiary get medical services or treatment. And although not required, we encourage payees to go beyond managing finances and to be actively involved in the beneficiary's life. And then for those of you who may be interested in learning more about the Representative Payee Program and how we assist our most vulnerable citizens, I just want to let you know that last year we developed an interdisciplinary training mainly to provide our representative payees with the necessary information to complete their duties. But we quickly realized that the information could be used by basically by everybody, especially by those who either serve vulnerable adults and seniors. The training lessons contain information to help you recognize and prevent abuse, neglect, and financial exploitation. In addition, the training models include information about how to interact safely with the banking community and how to recognize changes in a person's ability to make decisions. You can find these modules and other resources at our website, and that's www.socialsecurity.gov/payee. We actually work very closely with a wide range of educational and financial institutions, government agencies, and other advocacy groups to develop these free online trainings. They're free, so anyone can view them. And we hope that you will share them through your networks and take advantage of this valuable resource to educate your members and audiences. Now, in addition to the video trainings, we also work closely with the WINGS, or the Working Interdisciplinary Network of Guardianship stakeholders. And we develop a representative payee judicial training. And the purpose of the training really is to provide information to judges and court staff about the representative payee program. It highlights the similarities and differences between the representative payee program and guardians. And it aims to better serve individuals who have both payee and guardians. And it also aims to enhance collaboration between courts and SSA. And for those of you who may or might not be familiar with the WINGS group, and perhaps some of you belong to a WINGS organization, it's a multidisciplinary group that includes judges, court staff, advocacy groups, family members, and individuals affected by guardianship. And their main purpose is to improve judicial processes, protect individuals' rights, and meet individual needs, among other things. So quickly, I just want to go over the legislative changes. So back in April 13, 2018, the President signed the Representative Pay Strengthening Protections for Social Security Beneficiaries Act of 2017. We are right now in the process of implementing the new requirements resulting from this legislation. But overall, the new law accomplished the following things. First, and I already mentioned this one, it reduces the burden on families by exempting custodial parents of minor children and disabled individuals as well as spouses from annual payee accounting. 2, it updates rules regarding background checks and payee selection. 3, it also calls for stronger monitoring of representative payee. So again, as I mentioned, we're expanding our on-site reviews to include individuals and also the number of on-site reviews. And finally, the law also addresses liability regarding overpayments, congressional reporting, and data sharing. And I believe that we're going to be taking questions at the end. So please, if you have any questions, jot them down so you could ask me at the end. And now I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Aisha and Mary from the Administration for Community Living. Thank you.
Hi, and thank you, Lydia. This is Aisha with the Administration for Community Living.
Sorry.
Today I have the...
Sorry, I forgot to move the slides. Sorry.
That's all right. Today I have the pleasure of sharing some of ACL's investments in the area of elder justice. In 2016 and 2017, ACL received approximately $6 million to develop innovation grants. These grants are designed to advance and develop the knowledge base of emerging areas such as forensic centers, guardianship, tribes, and self-neglect. Today I have the pleasure of sharing with you where we are with some of our self-neglect grantees. The Older Americans Act defines self-neglect as an adult's inability due to physical or mental impairment, diminished capacity to perform self-care. Some examples are obtaining food, goods, and managing finances. The goal of the self-neglect grants are to improve the understanding of why people self-neglect and expand on APS's knowledge and response to self-neglect. A brief overview. In 2016, ACL awarded 3 self-neglect grants to the following entities: the National Adult Protective Services Association, which they have been developing a self-neglect knowledge base that is designed to inform research. The second entity is Rutgers University, which they have been working on prediction processes to improve self-neglect among elderly and expanding research and creating predictive indexes. And thirdly, Benjamin Rose Institute on Aging has been working on increasing their knowledge of risk factors, interventions among older adults and individuals with disabilities to prevent the occurrence and reoccurrence of self-neglect. To date, NAPSA has conducted a systematic self-neglect literature review of published articles over the past 20 years. These articles have been analyzed to ensure they meet NAPSA's inclusion criteria. With the analysis, NAPSA has discovered gaps and many key areas that have been overlooked in the area of self-neglect. They have conducted a self-neglect APS survey, which is referred to as SNAP. Of this survey, 54 APS programs have participated. Of the 54, 53 were state APS programs, and we also had a territory, which was Guam. The final report will be made available hopefully by the end of 2018, which will include research needs and highlight some of the best practices in which they've discovered in their research. Rutgers, they have been developing some predictive indexes and identifying ways to leverage and expand existing research to improve the projection of self-neglect in various racial and ethical communities. This has been done by exploring social and cultural contexts of self-neglect from older adults and looking at barriers and challenges from an ethical or cultural perspective, and attempting to build on or identify interventions and ways to prevent self-neglect. Likewise, their final product will consist of quantitative and qualitative data, which will be used in the future, hopefully, to leverage some additional funds so we can continue to build on our work over here at ACL. Thirdly, Benjamin Rose, They have partnered with Texas APS programs, Well-Made Charitable Foundation, and the Elder Justice Coalition. They have been collaborating on doing some screening vulnerable adults attending Texas primary care clinics for self-neglect risk factors. Those identified as self-neglecting are referred to APS. Those at risk receiving targeted long-term services and supports to prevent self-neglect. A comparison group receives the usual care. Evaluations assess whether the intervention groups have better outcomes than the comparison group or are more likely to remain at home and have lower health care costs. Again, their report will be made available on acl.gov at the end of their grant cycle. You can expect this report probably towards the end of this year, worst case scenario at the beginning of 2019. We will send out a blast once we find out we have their final reports of all 3 grantees. As you can see, there are some commonalities among the 3 grantees, so we really commend them for doing this in-depth research as it relates to self-neglect. Without further ado, the next speaker is a staple in the Aging Network. She has published articles, presented at various aging conferences, and she's a colleague of mine. I present to you guys Mary Toomey.
Thank you so much, Aisha. I really appreciate that. So I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about another focus of those 2016 Elder Justice Innovation Grants was to address abuse in guardianship. And Aisha was just talking about self-neglect, which we know from research comprises somewhere between 50 and 70% of all cases reported to Adult Protective Services. So self-neglect impacts a huge amount of people. Being impacted at much smaller rates, but in really significant ways, are people who come under a guardianship, which occurs when a person petitions usually the probate court, but a court saying that a person is no longer able to manage their own health and well-being, their activities of daily living, or the managing of their finances. And there are 2 kinds of guardianship, without going into too much detail. Guardianship of the person, which is more about health and welfare and activities of daily living, and guardianship of the estate. But when someone applies for a guardianship, the person who becomes what most states call the ward, the person under the guardianship, loses a significant number of rights. And those vary from state to state. Through the years, there have been numerous exposés about abuses of people who are placed under guardianship. And because the trend in the world of aging and disability rights is away from more restrictive alternatives like guardianship, especially a full guardianship or a plenary guardianship, away from that and more into supported decision-making and person-centered care, ACL was really interested in investing in projects that were going to examine how can groups like probate courts and social service agencies that work with older adults and adults with disabilities and WINGS, which Lydia mentioned, how can those groups help us first examine the issue of abuse in guardianships and then move from the tendency to perhaps go very quickly to a full guardianship to other less restrictive alternatives. So the 3 grantees in 2016 were the Stark County, which is in Ohio, Probate Court, that's Canton, Ohio, which is also where the Football Hall of Fame is, the Volunteers of America, Minnesota, and the American Bar Association Commission on Law and Aging. I took a look at all 3 of the grantees, and I wanted to just start by talking a little bit about what I saw as the themes of their work, and then I'll talk about what they're each doing individually. And then I'll also pause here to say, just like Aisha did, that these grants are currently still active grants, so these entities are all doing work right now, which is very exciting to talk with them on a monthly basis. But when they have final reports and when they have products that are created under the grant, whether that's a training or an evaluation of some kind, those will be things that we can share with the field, so we will be doing that. Some of the themes that I saw is this all the grants are trying to reduce the reliance on plenary or full guardianships through increased use of supported decision-making. They're also using mediation in cases where guardianships come to the court, and often we find this is when families are disputed or in dispute about who should take care of a parent or other loved one, how that person should be cared for. They're finding that mediation is a good tool to bring families together. Sometimes guardianships are not necessary after the families have come together and talked in a mediated environment. Prevent use of abuse in the context of a guardianship through monitoring guardianships. Once the court imposes a guardianship on someone and the guardian and that ward go off into the sunset, how does the court monitor how that relationship is going and if the needs of the ward are actually being cared for? One of the ways we can avoid abuse is by monitoring. And then create networks of diverse stakeholders. So the court shouldn't be acting alone. The court needs to work in combination, in cooperation with social service agencies that are serving older adults and adults with disabilities, adult protective services if there is abuse suspected, etc. So those are some of the themes. Let's turn to the Stark County Probate Court as the first grantee. They are doing some really innovative things. They're using conflict mediation to bring together people and try to really examine whether or not the guardianship is necessary, or is the guardianship happening because the family can't agree. And they've had success both in not having cases have to go to guardianship, or perhaps it's a guardianship of one side, just guardianship of the person, or just guardianship of the finances, but not both. So really tailoring the guardianship to the needs of the older adult or the adult with disability as a result of mediation. They have a really great guardianship visitor program. They call it Court Angels. The vast majority of their volunteers are older adults themselves who are trained by the court to go out into the field and visit with people under guardianship wherever they live and report back to the court on what they found. And they are doing an evaluation of that program, looking at how do the wards and how do the guardians feel about that program, because they have had several experiences where guardians have said, I'm so glad you came. I felt like I was doing this all by myself. It's helpful to me to know that the court cares and is watching out for us. They have partnered with other court systems. They're taking their model to other parts of Ohio, and they've partnered locally with Stark County Adult Protective Services, and they have retained an outside evaluator from Miami University in Ohio. So we look forward to that report. The second grantee is the American Bar Association Commission on Law and Aging. They have been, the money we gave them, they actually then turned around and dispersed it to 7 wings. So the WING stands for Working Interdisciplinary Networks of Guardianship Stakeholders in 7 states, and those states are Alaska, Alabama, Florida, Idaho, Indiana, Oregon, and Utah. Some of those groups are starting new wings. Others had existing wings that they're expanding. They have also created action tools on issues related to elder abuse. The most recent one was promoting options less restrictive than guardianships. And those are available already on the American Bar Association website, www.americanbar.org. And they have an outside evaluator for their program, which is the National Center for State Courts. So they are doing great work promoting, and they're working with the Social Security Administration, as Lydia mentioned.
Yes.
Yeah, it's great. And then the third grantee is the Volunteers of America, Minnesota. And Volunteers of America is a large social service agency in Minneapolis. They use the grant funding to establish a center of excellence in supported decision-making. They have been going all over the Twin Cities areas, but all over the state as well, training social workers and attorneys, judges, and others about alternatives to guardianship, really carrying the torch for supported decision-making and how to imbue practice with older adults and adults with disabilities with elements and the philosophy of supported decision-making, and they've been doing a great job. They are also using mediation for high-conflict guardians and other diversion programs, but really another innovative thing is I was about to say, I think they're the first place in the country, but I'm going to stop for saying that. But they are one of very few places in the country that has actually established a hotline where you can call and complain about a guardian. And they have, that phone has been ringing with people, especially people under guardianship, saying, my guardian isn't allowing me to do this thing that I want to do, that I believe I have the right to do and the capacity to do. And that's, as I said, that's been very innovative. Our next slide is just a way that you can reach out to the Administration for Community Living, our Office of Elder Justice and Adult Protective Services. We hope to be able to continue to invest in innovative projects like the self-neglect projects and these guardianship diversion projects in the future. If you sign up to either friend us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter or get our news feed, you could be among the first to know about future grant opportunities, whether they're Elder Justice Innovation grants or our grants to Adult Protective Services. And I appreciate your time. Let me turn it over to Susan, a colleague from the Department of Justice, who we really have a lot of affection and respect for. Take it away, Susan.
Well, thank you very much, Mary and Aisa, for the introduction. And what I'm going to talk to you all about today is the EPA Act, interagency collaboration. As I mentioned in the opening, we're so pleased to have so many federal partners on the phone today and to be collaborating with so many really across the federal agencies. And then spotlight on a few Department of Justice projects for you to show you, some of what we're doing. So to get started with the Elder Abuse Prevention and Prosecution Act, this is an act that was enacted in October and signed by the President in 2017 to prevent elder abuse and exploitation and essentially improve the justice system's response to victims of elder abuse and financial exploitation. And what's always interesting with this legislation is to really take a look and see what the Senate says is the purpose of the act. And here, it's a very poignant quote in the Senate report. It says, for a nation that prides itself on institutionalized care and financial support for its older population, the United States continues to fall short in efforts to end abuse and exploitation of our nation's elderly population. And Congress identified elder abuse as a serious problem decades ago, but eliminating the problem has essentially proved difficult. And so the Act basically is attempting to focus on some areas to increase prosecution, investigation, and models, particularly as Mary spoke about, guardianship to improve the plight of the elderly in this country. So moving on, I'm going to go briefly through each title of the Act and highlight those important areas that I think would be of interest to folks. The first is in Title I, where the Act establishes support for federal cases involving elder justice. And here, the Act establishes an elder justice coordinator in all federal judicial districts at the Department of Justice. So every Department of Justice district, 90-plus districts, will have an elder justice coordinator as a federal district lead. And this is very important because it not only allows elder justice issues to be focused on throughout the country, but it also allows potentially a location for federal and state partners and local partners to coalesce around an elder justice coordinator. Secondly, the Act asks for the implementation or requires the implementation of comprehensive training for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. So getting the FBI increasingly, obviously they've done a number of these cases, but focusing more on this training. And what's particularly interesting in the Act is the language that includes within this education, education on how to work with and interview, et cetera, elderly victims and elderly witnesses, because as we know, the elderly as both victims and witnesses require special consideration and attention, and that's part of the Act's hope there. And then finally, establishing working groups to provide policy advice. And this goes to the issue that Mary just spoke about, which is guardianship, obviously a critical issue of our time. In Title II, this title focuses on improved data collection and federal coordination. And here, it requires that DOJ establish best practices for data collection on elder abuse and ultimately provide that data in a public-facing way, which we will be working to do on the Elder Justice website, which can be found at elderjustice.gov. Secondly, the department must collect and publish data on elder abuse cases and investigations, and the Health and Human Services must provide for publication of data as well. So there'll be federal coordination on data collection, sharing, and reporting. In Title III, the Act focuses on the enhanced victim assistance to elder abuse survivors. And there's one section of the regulation that talks about the sense of the Senate. And again, sort of an underlying purpose here is that elder abuse involves exploitation, obviously, of potentially vulnerable individuals. Combating this abuse will require support for victims and prevention. And finally, and importantly, the Senate basically supports a three-pronged approach: prevention of elder abuse, protection of victims, and prosecution of perpetrators. Finally, the Department's Office of Victims of Crime is going to be required to report to Congress on the nature and the amount of funding under the Victims of Crime Act of 1984 for victims of crime who are elders. Moving on to Title IV. So Title IV is specifically titled, as you can see here, the Robert Matava Elder Abuse Prosecution Act. And, a big strain or a strong strain in this legislation is the problem and scourge of financial exploitation. And so this particular portion of the Act enhances the penalty for telemarketing and email fraud directed at elders. And specifically, the bill expands the definition of telemarketing to include measures to induce investment for profit, participation in a business opportunity, or commitment to a loan. So expanding the definition to basically include more acts that are perpetrated against our nation's elderly. Second, a defendant who's convicted of telemarketing or email fraud that targets victims who are over age 55 is subject to an enhanced criminal penalty and mandatory forfeiture. So those are big things. Age of 55, enhancing the criminal penalty, and providing for mandatory forfeiture. And then finally, the bill actually adds healthcare fraud to the list of offenses subject to enhanced penalties. Moving on to the second portion here of the Matava Elder Abuse Prosecution Act, it requires as well, and I'll just highlight this top piece, that the department in coordination with the Elder Justice Coordinating Council has to provide information and training to help states and governments investigate, prosecute, and prevent the impact of elder abuse and financial exploitation. And I'll talk a bit later about the coordination of the Elder Justice Coordinating Council, but those of us on this webinar, are very proud and pleased to participate in the working group of the Council, which brings together all members of the federal agencies that touch upon elder abuse and neglect issues, and that's pretty much most agencies. Moving on, to the next, there are a few miscellaneous provisions of the EPA Act, as we refer to it now, that are worth mentioning. The first is the block grant to the states for social services, and here in Title V, it specifies that HHS may award APS, Adult Protective Services, demonstration grants to assess guardianship and conservatorship proceedings and implement necessary changes. Again, like financial exploitation, guardianship is definitely something that is part of this act that is seen as a significant area that needs to be focused upon. Next, in the miscellaneous area, I will just focus on the fact here that DOJ has to report to Congress on its outreach to state and local enforcement agencies on the process for collaborating to investigate and prosecute interstate and international elder financial exploitation cases. So, the focus of the Act is really international, federal, state, and local, as it takes a large village to basically bring these criminals to justice. Secondly, DOJ must publish model power of attorney legislation for purpose of preventing elder abuse, and again, publish best practices for improving guardianship proceedings. And much of what Mary talked about, I think, is fodder for some of that work. So at this point, I'm going to talk about examples of proposed interagency collaboration. And just last week, as part of the lead up into World Elder Abuse Awareness Day at the end of this week, the Elder Justice Coordinating Council got together and addressed recommendations from the working group. And we were pleased to have Secretary Azar and Attorney General Sessions at the event, as well as the principals of other agencies as well. And what we discussed here are three different areas of interagency collaboration that I wanted to focus on briefly. In the areas of research and grants as one, data collection as a second, and finally dissemination. So first, in the area of research and grants, what I'm going to talk about now are the publicly facing proposals that were made to the Elder Justice Coordinating Council from the Elder Justice Working Group, which is made up of some of us on this phone as well as other agency members and their staff. So the first in the area of research and grants was that the agencies want to share information about funding opportunities before the grants or contracts are essentially made. So get the sharing up front. In addition, share information about who's been awarding grants or contracts, and share information about research findings. We're all doing work in this area, and 1 + 1 = 3 in this regard, where we share the information that we have. And finally, identify the all-important research gaps and needs where research is needed to basically support the profession and build a strong foundation for our work. The second area of collaboration is in the area of data collection. And here, the working group proposed conducting a preliminary scan of the national level sources of data on elder mistreatment and characteristics of the data set. So what do we have? And then again, identify the gaps. What data do we need and where are the gaps? And assess the extent to which the information needs are not met by current data collection efforts. Finally, this set of proposals also includes making recommendations for how and to what extent existing federal data collection could meet the needs identified. Finally, the third area of interagency collaboration is that of dissemination of information both to the public and to professionals in aging about elder abuse and financial exploitation. And here, obviously, we all work tirelessly as agencies, federal, state, local, international, to do our work. And what we want to do here is make sure that it's getting to those professionals who can use it and to those members of the public, extremely importantly, who need it. So what we're doing here by way of collaboration is gathering information about each agency's dissemination channels for both the public and aging professionals based upon topic. Is it a financial exploitation issue? Is it a rural issue? Is it an international fraud issue? And how are we going to get that information out? Identify current agency areas of collaboration and coordination and potential agency areas. Look at our successes. The department had a launch of a sweep, information about a sweep in financial exploitation sweep in February of 2018, and that was a prime example of tremendous interagency coordination to get the information out to the public and get the information sources flowing. So we want to continue to capitalize on those models and build other models where they're needed. I should also say that the committee, committed to meeting monthly as so many issues are happening and so many events are happening in the elder justice and financial exploitation area, that we want to stay on top of all of that. So finally, in this last slide, I wanted to talk about some of the projects to spotlight that the Department of Justice is working on. And before doing so, I just wanted to thank the leadership of the department for being so supportive of these issues, and my colleagues, as well as our contractors, fellows, and subject matter experts who work tirelessly all year to really to make this work possible. So first, briefly, the Elder Justice Task Forces and Coordinators. So I've spoken already about the coordinators who were in place at the beginning of 2018, but 2 years ago, the department launched 10 Elder Justice Task Forces throughout the country, basically initially opened up to address issues of nursing homes who provide grossly substandard care to their residents, and have since expanded in many cases to do work in the area of financial exploitation and abuse. These task forces are multidisciplinary teams. As we always say, it takes a village to combat elder abuse and financial exploitation, and these teams include federal prosecutors, state prosecutors and investigators, ombudsmen, adult protective services, first responders, law enforcement, medical examiners, and anyone who could be at the table in those locations to basically, fight elder abuse and financial exploitation. Where they are currently located, and I will go through this very briefly, is in the Northern District of California, Northern District of Georgia, District of Kansas, Western and Eastern Districts of Kentucky, Northern District of Iowa, District of Maryland, Southern District of Ohio, Eastern District of Pennsylvania, Middle District of Tennessee, and Western District of Washington. And those are the places where they're located. You can find information about them on our website. Our second is EAGLE, the Elder Abuse Guide for Law Enforcement, and I understand that Julie and Eden will be discussing this in more detail. So I'll simply say that the EAGLE was put together to identify, intervene, and help resolve elder abuse issues developed by law enforcement as a collaborative effort, and I will leave it to my colleagues to speak more about EAGLE. I next want to talk about the EAR, the Elder Abuse Resource Roadmap, and this is an excellent example of interagency collaboration. On the EAR, which is located again on elderjustice.gov, this is an opportunity for people to get online and report financial exploitation. Obviously, the Elder Abuse and Prosecution Act is focused on financial exploitation as an incredibly important issue, and the Elder Justice Coordinating Council meeting focused on the intersection of the opioid crisis and financial exploitation. So if financial exploitation is happening, if you get on the department's tool here, the EAR, on the financial exploitation portion of the website, you can click through a decision tree that will basically take you through who caused you to suffer the loss, be it a family member, a stranger, what type of loss was suffered, be it loss of money or stock, and then ultimately to what agency do you report, APS, SEC, et cetera. The next item I wanted to talk about is the Multidisciplinary Team Technical Assistance Center, which is coordinated here by Talitha Gwynn Chevere, the Department of Justice's Elder Justice Initiative. And this provides for the investigation and the creation, in many cases, of multidisciplinary teams throughout the country. And Talitha is available to her contact information, again, on the website at the department to develop multidisciplinary teams. Talitha and her team has also come up with amazing toolkits to allow anybody to walk through the development of a multidisciplinary team. So I commend you to the website to take a look at that work. Elder Justice webinars. So we have a page of webinars that you can see on the left navigation of our website that goes through many of the upcoming webinars on triads, elder homicide, dementia, and also an archive of a tremendous number of webinars that we've been doing that are ready for you. And then the final point I'll make before turning it over to Julie is that we have in the website an entire set of elder justice presentations. And these are ready-made guides, files, PowerPoints, and fact sheets that you can go on and pull down in the event that you want to do a presentation. That afternoon you get called to do a presentation on something. Please take them, use them, plagiarize them. This is not English class, right? And use this information and please get it out there because there are so many people in need. And this is already provided by our wonderful Elder Justice Initiative colleagues and ready for you to use and get out in the world. So thank you again, and I turn it over to Julie.
Thank you so much, Susan. It has just been an honor to work with everybody on this team. Eden and I have really enjoyed the experience, and it's our distinct pleasure to be your tour guides today as we head down that road of elder justice and kind of take stock of where we are and where we're going toward WEAD 2018. And you'll see this slide and notice the Elder Justice Roadmap icon over in the corner. In 2014, and I would dare to say that some of you on this call were one of the 750 stakeholders who got together and said, we've been working in elder abuse in all our different fields for many, many years. It's time to come together to strategize, to go through the complexity and the multi-layers of elder abuse and see what we can do and see what we can share and see where we can solve the issues involved in elder abuse. And this is the perfect time to look at the Elder Justice Roadmap and to say, what have we done since then, and have we made progress? And I just want to say to Susan what a beautiful job you did in describing the Elder Abuse Prevention and Prosecution Act, because I think we can say, are we making progress? Yes. I think this just really helps to exemplify how we have come to the attention of policymakers and been able to get them to notice that we are making strides, but we have a long way to go, and we're going to need their assistance for future endeavors. But with being part of the National Center on Elder Abuse, I need to take stock of where we are and see what are we doing internally. We're fortunate enough to be one of the 27 resource centers throughout the country that the Administration on Community Living funds. And we have our mission and vision statement, which I think just says it all, and that is to improve the national response to elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation by gathering, housing, disseminating, and stimulating innovative, validated methods of practice, education, research, and policy. And I read that because I think it says so very much. Because all of us on this phone and on this webinar, we're all aging. And it's truly a privilege to be aging with all of its challenges, with all the things that are going on. And so we need to be able to embrace that and move this forward. And so as Eden and I were preparing today, we wanted to look at, I'm going to go through, somehow we went back on our slides, so I'm just going to move it forward here. And then Eden will be discussing with you what we feel in the National Center we want you to know so that you too can use our information and make, hopefully, your lives a little bit easier as we all progress on our journey. And I'm taking this journey through the slides here, but it never hurts to have a little overview. I'm not exactly sure why we reverted to the beginning, but it always happens, and that's pretty minor. Okay, we're almost there. And there we go. Take it away, Eden.
All right. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. So the NCEA has an incredible national presence, and we're so very fortunate to be working with a wide variety of national organizations. Some of those organizations include Advocacy and Services for LGBT Elders, SAGE, National Asian Pacific Center on Aging, NAPCA, National Adult Protective Services Association, NAPSA, the National Consumer Voice for Quality Long-Term Care, American Society on Aging, Ageless Alliance, and the Frameworks Institute. So what exactly are we up to? We're assembling something that we like to refer to as volunteer consumer committees to ensure that, most importantly, we're hearing from older people and getting their input on their needs and what matters the most to them. We're engaging with professionals and people from every state across the country through our Support and Tools for Elder Abuse Prevention initiative. We're designing culturally relevant resources with some of the groups that I had mentioned before. We're disseminating research, practice, and education-oriented materials, and we're developing them in-house and with our partners. Continuously creating and promoting campaigns such as WeAd, also disseminating monthly blogs from field experts, quarterly e-newsletters, and we're quite active on social media. We're maintaining training and publications databases on multiple websites. We're frequently out in the community, locally and statewide, conducting outreach, education, and hosting trainings. And nationally, we're attending quite a few aging and elder justice-oriented conferences. One of the essential first steps of promoting justice for all is understanding definitions, detecting signs that abuse is occurring, and knowing exactly where to turn to for added guidance. So this example that we're showing you here is a publication that we recently redesigned named Red Flags of Elder Abuse. Julie is going to tell you in short order a little bit more about the Reframing Elder Abuse Initiative. And what this did was really inspire us to take a look at our publications database. We decided to take a look at some of our older, most reliable public-facing materials and made subtle changes to the wording so that we would have a more solutions-oriented approach. We'll be providing a few web links at the end of the presentation so that you know exactly where to turn to for more information and to access some of these materials. And we also want you to keep in mind that you can contact us directly to request copies that we could ship to you for a variety of events or just to keep in-house at your own organization.
Very good. And also, as Eden was mentioning, we have lots of ways to access us. And we have a call center. Many of you are on our very robust listserv that we have. And then through emails, people contact us. And I wanted to point out just a couple of the trending items that we are receiving at the National Center. And especially with Social Security on the line, we decided we really should bring up about the new Medicare cards. In our call center, we've received many inquiries about the new Medicare cards, and I'm very pleased people are reaching out to us and asking, is this legitimate? Is Medicare really issuing new cards? It shows that we're making a difference, that people are savvy and that they want to know, and that maybe they aren't falling prey to some of this. But we have these many great materials, but we do have concerns that are they really getting to our most socially isolated people, because those are the ones that may not know that there are scammers out there who are going to prey upon a bit of the confusion with the new cards, call them and say, hey, it's Medicare calling, and I just want to verify your Medicare number and get some information from you. So I'm kind of asking, as all of you, a little call to action. Please go on our website if this information is something that you can disseminate to people that may not be able to go out of their homes. I would ask for you to do this so that we can protect them and protect our Medicare program too. Now, the other trend that we're seeing, of course, has to do with something that I think many of you are experiencing, that you've reported to us you're experiencing, and this is the intersection of elder abuse and the opioid crisis. Susan mentioned that last week we had the Elder Justice Coordinating Council, and Dr. Mosqueda was able to speak at that council, and she had the attention of Attorney General Sessions and Secretary Azar, and they were fully listening and engaged. And I think if we're measuring our progress, I think that is another benchmark of progress, that they too are wanting to know about what we're encountering, what we're seeing, and if there are any solutions. And I wanted Eden to weigh in because she was very instrumental in putting together the report that we did with this.
So obviously this is a nationwide subject that we're prioritizing and continuing to track. There are APS offices and units on aging in states such as Iowa, Ohio, Wisconsin, Missouri, and Nebraska, and well beyond that, who have designed and implemented data collection and surveying measures. What they're attempting to do is capture information regarding how the opioid crisis is impacting individuals in their vicinities. A few weeks ago, I was fortunate enough to sit on a roundtable discussion hosted by our administrators at our funder's office, the Administration for Community Living, and there were a few insights that I wanted to touch upon. For example, professionals from Iowa shared that their state's Department of Human Services had launched a newsletter to educate the public on opioid use among aging people and people with disabilities. During their intake processes, they are also tracking information about substance abuse by caretakers and substance abuse by vulnerable adults. In Missouri, they had noted that they saw a rise in opioid abuse on persons served and the impact it was having on staff caseloads. In their intake screening procedures, an opioid hotline indicator has been added to capture data on eligible adults and alleged abusers.
All set, Eve?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we also wanted to go into some of the frequently shared resources, and you will be getting a copy of the slides so you'll be able to access some of these links.
So on this page, we have our go-to list of resources coupled with helpful guiding notes that we oftentimes rely to when we're providing information and referral services and technical assistance. So a general rule of thumb is that when there are any alleged instances of abuse, neglect, or exploitation, to obviously contact 911 or law enforcement authorities, especially if that person's life is in danger. Pretty much a no-brainer. So the list that we have here, NAPSA houses information about adult protective services, so that resource is hyperlinked at the top. We have a variety of caregiver resources, Family Caregiver Alliance, USC, we have our own caregiver support center. AARP also has a very reliable caregiver resource center. In terms of abuse in long-term care settings, there is a resource link to the Ombudsman program and more information on that. We always recommend when people are contacting us about abuse of people in long-term care settings to also contact state licensing and certification agencies in their vicinity, the Medicare Beneficiary Ombudsman Program, and the State Surveying Agency. And the list to the right reflects financial and cyber crimes resources that we highly recommend, including Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Better Business Bureau, and they have a scam tracker. The Internet Crime Complaint Center, also known as IC3, and they accept online internet crime complaints. The Federal Trade Commission also operates a do not call registry that we always recommend that our callers and people that they're calling on behalf of sign up. I know personally I make sure that I'm signed up and have my information listed. The U.S. Postal Inspection Service, and just some other resources that kind of coincide with that.
And, Eden and I discuss this all the time, that we have all these amazing, amazing resources. But I think Mary Toomey is one who drove it home to us, Mary, with the logic model, that we have all these amazing things, but are they doing any good? Are we having an impact? And that's my theme of the day. And I would be at a resource table at a conference and literally have people just kind of avert their eyes from our table or make comments like, oh, elder abuse, oh yeah, that's too bad. There's not much you can do about that. And how are we going to get people to the table, literally to the table, and talking to us about this? So this is when we began engaging with the Frameworks Institute for them to do a study, find out why people were not discussing elder abuse or turning away from it, and to try to cultivate that thinking about older people as people and not objects of care, and to get the public orientation towards solutions, because we all know there are solutions, boost the public sense of efficacy, promote that theme of social justice, and have this structure of justice theme that this next slide will show. Because what we all do know is that our country does believe in justice for all. And this framework's structuring, this theme, has really been beneficial to all of us. Therefore, no matter how old we are, we all deserve to be treated as full members of our society. Our society does not always keep people connected to their communities throughout all stages of life, and our society does lose a vital part of our community when we do not work to prevent and address elder abuse. So that kind of brings us full circle back to the elements of the Elder Justice Roadmap. We are still seeking out how we can better build awareness and programs and research and policy and training. And it kind of leads us also, again, to our current endeavors to World Elder Abuse Awareness Day 2018. And we have some things to share with you about that soon-to-be-here day.
Yes. So this Friday, June 15th, marks another annual World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. At the NCEA, we can't believe that this day has finally come. We always do so much planning in advance to finally arrive at this day. So what this commemorative day presents is an opportunity for communities around the world to promote a better understanding of abuse and neglect of older people. How is this being done? We can all take part in raising awareness of the cultural, social, economic, and demographic processes affecting elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. So in case you're still wrapping up your plans and need some last-minute resources, we absolutely have you covered. On the microsite, we have outreach tools, a social media guide, which includes reframed sample social media posts. We add FAQs that list examples of pairing data points, explanations and solutions, customizable PowerPoints, certificates and flyer templates, some PSA videos that we created in collaboration with the Frameworks Institute titled Structure of Justice to Prevent Elder Abuse, and there's short and long versions of those. Publications that we've highlighted before, such as Red Flags of Abuse, Facts about Elder Abuse, and many more items. And if you actually haven't been able to arrange an event, please utilize our event locator. And according to our last count, there were nearly 300 events represented on our map and over 11 countries outside of the United States who are hosting their events across the world. Finally, another resource that we'd like to note is our chat support feature. So you could go onto the eldermistreatment.usc.edu link that is all the way underneath the We Add campaign icon in the right-hand side of the slide. And what you do is click on the Chat Live with Us button on the bottom right-hand corner,
and you could direct message us with any questions that you have, and we're available Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's it, and it's been a very exciting year. And now, speaking of excitement, I get to talk to you about our latest project, which again exemplifies the progress I think that we have made. And this is through a grant funding of the Department of Justice. Susan mentioned this. And we are going to take you on a brief tour of the Elder Abuse Guide for Law Enforcement, EAGLE. And we're going to just share that with you very briefly so that you will have a sense of what's happening. So this is what we have come up with the great assistance of people at UCI, University of California, Irvine, amazing talent and time contributed by our partners from there, and the Gerontology School at USC, the Davis School of Gerontology, and law enforcement themselves, and the Department of Justice was very actively involved. And this is designed for law enforcement. It was meant to be an app at first, and then through many focus groups throughout the nation, we learned that officers preferred to have this available to them on their computers in their cars and on their phones if that was part of their protocol in their offices. And so this is mobile friendly also. But as you can see, I'm not going to go into the first responders checklist, but it's something that anyone can use. We talk about this for law enforcement, but so many social workers and APS workers have said to us, I would like this. And we think, great, use this. It's for everyone to use. And so I wanted to leave this as a teaser that you would go on and open either of these checklists. What I do want to point out to you is the state statutes feature, which has been very popular with people. So see if it's, of course, everything's going to slow down now to a crawl, and I know we're getting low on time. And you'd find your state, and you would click on that. I'm going to select Iowa just because it's there. And then you can go into how Iowa defines caretakers and their state statute on dependent adults, etc. So all these things can be found with just culling through this site. And then down here is a resource box where you can type in a zip code. I'm going to type in a Wisconsin zip code. Go Badgers. I'm from Wisconsin, so I find that fun to do. And here we go. We get into Greater Wisconsin Agency on Aging resources. Scroll through there, find out what people need from the particular area. And then the last one I want to just go through is interviewing older adults. Because one thing we really wanted to model on this site was to talk with law enforcement about hearing the voice of older adults. So many of the photos that we screened for this site portrayed forlorn or hopeless-looking older adults, or law enforcement speaking to the caregiver but not speaking to the older person. And so some of you might recognize Detective Cher Hill in this particular site. We have so much cooperation from law enforcement being part of the photo shoot and helping us. And this gives you a sense of how the pages are laid out. And they're very short, to the point, specific, and help law enforcement get what they need and hopefully do their job with precision and effectively. So this is, I hope, spurred your interest in going to the site, and we hope that you will go and look at it and make use of it. We also want to encourage you to connect with us online, and here are some of the where you can reach us and get a hold of us and call us and talk to us. And I just want to thank you for all your time and attention, and Eden, who always does such a magnificent job, and everyone today. It's just been a complete pleasure. I think with that, I'll turn it back and see if we have any questions that we can help with. Hello?
Hi, so just a reminder, if you do have questions for our presenters, please submit those to our chat. So we do have a couple that have come in, so we're going to bounce around here because some of them for our earlier presenters. So this one goes out to Lydia. There was a question asking how their organization can submit an application.
great. Thank you. That's an easy one. I'm happy. So to submit an application to become a representative payee, you have to complete a form, and that usually you have to do that in a field office. So it has to be a face-to-face because we conduct an interview basically before you become the representative payee. So all you have to do is contact your nearest Social Security office, and if you're not sure which one is your nearest Social Security office, you could go to our website and find the office locator and just enter your zip code. And for organizations, they also need to provide us with their employer identification number. So in addition to other type of information. And then that's it.
Great. Thank you so much, Lydia. Another question that came in, and I think, Susan, this might have come in while you were speaking, asking to repeat what you said was available in the Northern District of California. Does that ring a bell?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Lori. So in the Northern District of California is the location of one of the elder justice task forces. And if you go to elderjustice.gov and go on the Elder Justice Task Force page, which is under the prosecutor left navigation, you will find the point person for the Elder Justice Task Force in the Northern District of California is Gioconda Molinari. And this task force is basically made up of, as I mentioned a little earlier, federal and state prosecutors and investigators, adult protective services ombudsmen, first responders, and many of the people who come together as a multidisciplinary team, in essence, to prosecute cases, to help out with problems, et cetera.
Great. Thank you so much. Another question around the area agencies on aging and what effort they play, what role they play in this effort.
Hi, this is Julie, and we're working very closely with the Offices on Aging through an initiative that we have called STEEP, where we're working with N4A. First, we surveyed them to see what they were looking for, which was the National Association of Area Agencies on Aging. And we are putting together a toolkit for them and to reach out for them to let them know we have materials that we're providing them. Not everyone is a member of N4A, and so now we've also reached out to all the other independent offices on aging, and of course are keeping in contact with ACL, and maybe ACL would want to chime in on this also.
Yeah, this is Mary. I can chime in briefly to say that the Older Americans Act has a Title VII, which is part of the money that goes through the state units on aging to the area agencies on aging is under Title VII for elder rights work, and many AAAs do use that funding for things related to adult protective services, to run a multidisciplinary team, to do public awareness, to do training and education. We're doing a workshop at the National AAA conference in Chicago talking about how to increase your elder justice footprint. And one of the things that I think is very interesting is that a lot of AAAs are doing elder justice work, but they're not calling it elder justice work. For example, anything that breaks down isolation, as Julie and Eden were talking about, we now know that isolation is such a huge risk factor for elder abuse that people may have lots of programs that break down isolation of seniors and adults with disabilities. They don't think of those things as elder justice programming, but in fact, they are. So that's another thing we're talking to AAAs about around the country is how are you rebranding some of the work you're doing to break down isolation and to really connect people, and how do we recognize that as elder justice even though it's not, it's not specifically branded in that way. So thank you.
Great. Thank you for those responses. Julie, coming back to you, another question about, are there printed copies of the Know the Red Flags publication available?
Yes, we can, you certainly get them online, and if you need some, contact us. We can do some limited quantities for you. We have to, since we're national, we have to be a little careful of how many we can afford to give sometimes, but yes, we will work with you on that and see what we can do. But yeah, they're accessible online, and
And you can email us at ncea@med.usc.edu with your request.
Julie and Eden, aren't they in multiple languages?
They
Thank you.
are.
Thank you, Mary.
Yes.
Great, great. Well, given that most elder abuse cases involve family and state law, what is the expectation for the federal elder justice coordinators? Can you speak to their role?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. That's a really good question. And before I answer that one, I just wanted to also say, the disseminating information in multiple languages is obviously critical. It was one of the issues, to follow up on the last question, that the Elder Justice Working Group took up. And I can also say that the Elder Justice website, elderjustice.gov, also has, much of, if not most of the website in Spanish. So I think that's important for all of us, and thank you for bringing that up. So the Elder Justice Coordinators, right. As you mentioned, this work of combating elder abuse and financial exploitation is multi-jurisdictional. And so the federal Elder Justice Coordinators are essentially, have federal jurisdiction. However, there's various ways in which they're doing this work. The first is in casework. So, for example, I see a question here about nursing homes. We, the Elder Justice Coordinators, will be looking at, failure of care and lack of, for those nursing homes who provide grossly substandard care under a federal statute. Also in the area of financial exploitation, there are many cases, as was indicated in the sweep that the department did in February of 2018, where that casework is obviously federal. Secondly, the federal coordinators will be working likely on community outreach, which of course they can do in their districts. But I think the really important point to keep in mind is the model, or the hope, is that Elder Justice Coordinators, where appropriate in their districts, are going to be able to develop a multidisciplinary team that will include, state and local folks in the work that comes up. And so if something comes up that is a state issue or a local issue or both, then they will collaborate. So in that way, they will, provide a bit of the glue or a bit of a hub for work at all levels of jurisdiction.
Great, thank you. One up question around cultural change and promoting cultural awareness. Can you consider ongoing in that in turn to with regard to elder abuse?
Hi, this is Julie. Absolutely. That's our work with the Frameworks Institute, and I think, as Carol nailed it when she said about ageist attitudes, we really have to get at the root of that. Frameworks is doing a program with leaders in aging organizations on reframing aging. Have an excellent toolkit about it, and then of course we were a spin-off of that with reframing elder abuse. And, Carol, every time I hear that word anti-aging or I see it in ads, my hair just stands on end, because what are we telling people when we're saying that? And it just is part of something that I'm going to want to make everybody accountable for. We need to all start changing the language, the way that we refer to people, going away from the more paternalistic, and we need to take over for people with no, because we all know 80 and 90-year-olds who can do circles around all of us. So it's getting that message out, it's getting that education. We're really striving to redo our materials to meet those needs, and as I said, we have a toolkit on it and a public service announcement. And just like Susan said, plagiarize, take our materials. It's not plagiarizing, we want you to have them, and a co-brand, or if only one logo fits, put your logo on it. We just want the word out there. For me.
Thank you. Do you know if Northern Georgia was one of the Elder Justice Task Force locations?
Yes. The Northern District of Georgia is one of the Elder Justice Task Force locations. And in fact, the Northern District of Georgia was a pioneer in bringing a failure of care case criminally against a Georgia operator, known as the Hauser case, if people are familiar with that. So yes, they've done a tremendous amount of work in the area, and they are one of the task forces.
Great, thank you. Do you know anything about future plans to help continue raising awareness to other organizations and contacts, including the local ADAs and other law enforcement?
This is Julie. So it's the hope with the EAGLE, the Elder Abuse Guide for Law Enforcement, that we disseminate very widely, and we have a plan for doing that. Now, we are starting with law enforcement. We have a listserv of 3,000 that we are strategically sending it out to every law enforcement office in the country and letting them know that this exists. But we also will then be putting it out on all of our listservs and ask other people to be disseminating it, because there is a lot of good, concise, valuable information for people to utilize. I'm going to the National Sheriff's Association conference this weekend to try to get it out. So again, we welcome all of us in this together for everyone to use it as you would like and to disseminate it.
And Julie, I can add on to that. This is Mary, that our Assistant Secretary for Aging, Lance Robertson, is speaking on this Saturday in Portland at the National Association of Attorneys General Conference as a representative for Secretary Azar, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, because the Attorney General of the state of Kansas made elder abuse his signature issue this year. And Assistant Secretary Robertson will be carrying the message of how we need to work together across the different silos: social services, aging and disability rights, and of course law enforcement and prosecutors. So I think that's another way that we are continuing to broadcast that information to attorneys general.
And this is Susan from the Department of Justice. I would also add, I mean, this is obviously something that all the agencies are really focused on. I mean, the department, through the Elder Justice Task Forces, through the Elder Justice Coordinators, and through training throughout the department and various components of the department, is obviously working in education training and collaboration with federal, state, and local investigators and attorneys general. I mean, this is the way that we're going to reach these problems jurisdictionally, and so that's obviously in our foremost in our minds.
Great, thank you. So one question from Toby, and I imagine this could probably be a webinar all in and of itself, but if someone could take a moment to briefly touch on, if you're in a state that doesn't have any elder abuse statutes, where do you start with being able to get law enforcement and APS and the court system all on the same page to help provide the right assistance?
So this is Susan. I'll talk about it kind of generally. So, for example, it depends on where the elder abuse or exploitation is occurring. So, for example, if we take the example of a nursing home, if something is happening in a nursing home that's grossly substandard care, then you've got the Federal False Claims Act that you could bring to bear on that particular focused situation. If you have certain types of, scams that the Department of Justice Consumer Fraud Section or other federal agencies can bring in a federal case, then you could do that. I would also say that, you don't need to have a specific statute related to, elder abuse when some of these situations are actually situations involving, assault, neglect, et cetera. So I think that using the statutes that are out there and using the violations that are out there are oftentimes one way to do it, at least from the law enforcement perspective.
Okay, great, thank you. A question going to work around MDTs. You mentioned Lisa's work and all of the resources available with the Elder Justice Initiative for MDTs. One issue is funding for MDT facilitator. Is there a plan to help with that, or any suggestions on how to receive funding or move that along?
This is Mary. I can jump in and just say a little bit. We have a funding opportunity that's out right now. Applications are due June 25th. The eligible applicants are the administrators to the State Adult Protective Services Program, but certainly the development of multidisciplinary teams, either at the state level or local level, are something that ACL has proven to want to support. But I've also heard of people going for victims of crime resources through the Department of Justice Victims of Crime Office to establish multidisciplinary teams or elder abuse forensic centers. So those are two possible funding streams. that I know of, but I'll stop there and see if anybody else wants to add. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mary. I would just underscore, the Office of Victims of Crime and going on the website, the department's website and the Office of Victims of Crime website specifically to get more information. But thank you, Mary, for that.
Okay, I'm just scrolling through here to see what other questions we might have that we might have missed or overlooked. I think a question earlier around terminology. There was a term mentioned, court angle. Is that already answered? The question is, what is a court angle?
Sorry, Lori, are you saying court, C-O-U-R-T, angle?
Yes, that's the question.
I think they might be referring to the court angels that were described in the pilot project that Susan was describing. And they wanted the volunteer program. That's what I'm thinking it is.
Yes, the court, okay, that was me. That was Mary. Sorry, Mary. So the court angels are volunteers who go out and visit people who have been placed under guardianship by the court to ensure that the guardian who has been appointed by the court is doing the job that they need to do to take care of the health and welfare and maximize the independence of the person under guardianship. So they call their court volunteer visitors court angels.
Great. Thanks for picking up on that and correct me there. So, I think we have time maybe for one last question here. How does one deal with undue influence and claims that a financial exploitation through, though it's been established, can't be prosecuted as long because of the elders maybe refusing to testify?
Well, let me jump in on this one and also maybe try to bring in the answer to the question about the Native American communities, because I think that's also one we may have a second for. So, every case is different. In some situations, if, you do have enough evidence that could be through, so in a case of financial exploitation, if you have evidence of, bank transactions, if you have evidence of other witnesses, if you have evidence of family members who are potentially not the perpetrators, then you might be able to bring your case with sufficient evidence, even though your victim specifically refuses to testify. Certainly, Maria Shumar at the department has done a lot of work with victims to speak with them, and maybe you have a victim services professional who is able to get the person a little bit more comfortable with that. So. It really does depend on the nature of the case as to whether or not the testimony is absolutely critical. I mean, obviously, you have capacity issues as well, where the person, is sometimes considered, sadly, to not be as credible a witness because of capacity issues. But again, it depends on the nature of the case. One person had a question about what was being done in some of the Native American communities, and I wanted to address that. I mean, certainly, that's something that the department is working on. There's an Office of Tribal Justice that handles a myriad of issues related to elder justice and tribal organizations throughout the country. As I know, ACL also has an office and works with grants to deal with those issues. I would say that I've personally experienced, tremendous collaboration between the tribes and the elder justice task forces in the Western District of Washington, out in Washington State, where outside of Seattle there are a number of different reservations and different state and local collaborations to try to assist with elder abuse issues on the reservation, being mindful and very careful of jurisdictional boundaries. So that is certainly something that the department and other agencies are looking into.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of your thoughtful responses to the questions. If you do have additional questions or we didn't get to your questions today, feel free to email those into the Elder Justice Initiative and we can field your questions from there, or you get in touch with our presenters from today and help get you the answers that you need. You can also email us through elder.justice@usdoj.gov or visit our wonderful website, elderjustice.gov. For a multitude of resources, and eventually this presentation will be posted on there as well as the recording. as well it be on the OVC TTAP website. So again, I want to thank you to all of our presenters, and a special thank you to all of our participants for taking time out of your day to learn about these wonderful programs and carry them back to your home base. We appreciate all of the work that you're doing and hope that this has been helpful to you. Any other closing words?
Just thank you all so much. We really appreciate this opportunity.
All right. Well, that concludes today's webinar. Thank you.